Welcome to 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a giant book and talk sexy about it. Is that a better one, Brian?
I don't know. Whatever.
We've had
insurrection, impeachment. I'm losing all my Twitter followers since my Parler account got taken down. I mean, I don't know what's happening in the world anymore. So.
Yeah. Before we start talking about the book, I was rereading today William Gaddis' biography. I don't know if you know this book.
Oh, no, I don't.
And I discovered something very interesting. Did you know that William Gaddis worked for Pfizer?
Oh, I didn't know it was Pfizer. I know he worked for Eastman Kodak and IBM, but that's
he worked for Pfizer, and here he says, Pfizer's not too bad. They let Dick Dowling and me write our mornings on our own stuff and show us off to clients as our novelists.
Amazing.
Yeah. I want to work for Pfizer also. I'll get a vaccine sooner, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So for anyone that's not watching and is listening at home, I'm Chad Post, joined as always by Brian Wood. And this week, our special guest is Rodrigo Frazan, who's the author of Bottom of the Sky, Invented Part, The Dream Part, the soon-to-be forthcoming The Remembered Part, along with a number of novels like Mantra that will someday be available in English. Rodrigo, thank you for joining us. I have a question for you about that book. Do you have the letters, the complete letters of William Gaddis?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yes. Yes.
Well, and here's a very interesting letter when he's delivering the proofs of Jair. Then he says, I won't have to read this damn book anymore. I'm so happy because I've been like 10 years, listening to this book,
I can't imagine. There's so much clutter and so much like frenetic energy in this book. Like to be working on it and rereading it. It's like it gets claustrophobic sometimes just reading it for the second time or third time. But
no, and from the point of view of a writer, I think that this sort of book must be held because every conversation you listen to, you're taking notes in order maybe to fit them. Any funny thing you listen to, it's like,
just gotta write it down.
Yeah.
And most of it's fodder, and you have to try to weed through where's the diamond in the shit. And
Exactly.
Are you a big fan of Gaddis or his work? You've got his letters and his biography.
In fact, one of my proudest moments in literature is because I was called to participate in that conjunctions dossier that came out after the Franzen thing, and they sort of organized some sort of a rally for the ghost of William Gaddis, and I'm among them.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah.
What about you? So, what about Gaddis and his writing, or perhaps JR in particular? What appeals to you? What about it do you like so much?
Well, since I sort of as you get older, you become sort of wiser and wiser, and you start liking more and more the thing that you won't be able to do.
Yeah,
never. That's one of the signs of you're growing all sort of nicely, I think, and but at the same time, it's like I really like the idea of Gaddis as some sort of pretty strange, because if you look at him historically, he's some sort of mutant beatnik writer. In fact, he shows up in Jack Kerouac's novels. Yeah. In The Subterraneans, he's one of the characters. And famously, William Barrock said one thing that it fascinates me about Gaddis. He says he's the one who taught me to recognize myself when I couldn't recognize myself yet. It's a great thing. And he's like an outsider, but he's one of many outsiders. In William Gass is another one, and Pynchon is another one. Stephen Dixon is another one that nobody mentions, and I think he's the real disciple of Gaddis. In fact, in one of Stephen Dixon's books, one that's called I, there's a whole chapter where he meets Gaddis, and Gaddis is like an asshole. He's like a fan, and I'm going to meet my master, and he bumps into him on the street and starts like talking to him how important he is to him, and Gaddis is like, shut up, I don't want to listen to this. Yeah.
So,
which is also.
I assume you read the book in English, but has it been translated into Spanish?
Well, all Gaddis is into Spanish. Sexto Piso. I mean, the recognitions came out like many, many, many years ago in Alfaguara, and then Sexto Piso, which is this Mexican Spanish publishing house, has published all Gaddis, with the exception of the letters. I think that's the only one that hasn't been.
The letters is a complicated rights situation right now. Let's just say.
No, what I really found really singular about him is that he embraces very successfully, the theme of failure. All his books are about failure, really.
Yeah.
And failing in an epic, triumphant way. I really like that.
Well,
it's a pretty Argentinian thing to do, also. So, we're failing all the time.
It's so weird because I'm noticing most people, when I'm talking to them about Gaddis, they mention the recognitions, which that's his first book, huge book that came out, and then there's this giant gap where he's doing these other jobs because that book was a failure, basically, right?
Yeah.
And then this comes out, and it gets, I don't know if people. How do you review this book? Do you think they read it like cover to cover and are really digging into it, or
this one? I'm not sure about, but there is the book called Fire the Bastards, which is a small pamphlet. Do you have it? I have the hardcover somewhere, but there's a paperback version available
by Jack Green.
Yeah, and it is kind of chronicles like all the mistakes that were made and people who reviewed the recognitions that indicate like they never read it. They read the other reviews and sort of copied that. So there are errors like introduced and like just get repeated throughout all these reviews because nobody ever really read it, and it like really just takes down like literary book reviewing criticism at that moment as being like clearly like no, they didn't read it, they didn't care. It's just like
it's an amazing book. And there was for a while there was a suspicion that was a book by William Gaddis also that he wrote.
The story that I heard
is by Jack Green.
One of our listeners might be able to verify this, but the story that I heard was that Steve Moore was handed the pamphlet of it in like Union Square in New York, where Jack Green was like giving this out.
Yeah.
At some point in time, and then that's how it got published. I don't know if that might be a false memory. It might not even be a true story, but I kind of like that theory. I would like just schlepping out his book and ended up in the hands of like a Delphi Archive editor.
Yeah, he was in some sort of like evangelic trip. He was trying to convert the sinners, in a way. But what really interests me of Gaddis really is this absurd idea of what is difficult, what is not difficult on literature, which is a completely stupid thing to do, to think about, the idea that there are books that are difficult and there are books that are not. For me, I mean, I had to read for work Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey, and it was the most difficult books I've met in my whole life, really.
That's really interesting because I wanted to bring up the difficult book thing, and I'm working on something about what difficult books even mean, like what that means to different people. And this book I still do not think is difficult. But what I think is super funny is that shows up in here in the section that we're talking about today, where Gibbs is like, I'm writing the most difficult book, and he wants to make it difficult intentionally. And then Bass reads it, he's like, I just don't understand. He's like, what's not to be understood? Like immediately.
But I think I'm sure that people who love I Love Lucy find Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm difficult, but they're not difficult at all. I mean, you have to switch on and like sort of go with the flow. I mean, all these books for me, I mean, and I'm talking about Don Quixote, Tristram Shandy, Ulysses, I don't know, In Search of Lost Time. All you have to do is read them.
Yeah.
It's like Moby Dick. How many people have started Moby Dick or say they're going to read it?
Moby Dick, it's another one,
It's a beautifully long book. It's just long, and the difficulty is the size. Maybe I just want the 6-inch foot long. I want the 6-inch, not the foot long. Well,
and there's a very interesting thing for me, read Jonathan Franzen that I can respect, or what he thinks or not, whatever. I mean, he's entitled to say what he thinks. But the very strange thing for me and very revealing is that nor Cervantes, nor Lawrence Stern, James Joyce, Proust, Melville, they never said this is the way to write and everyone should write like this.
Yep.
And the people that supposedly are writing the books that are appealing, easy, seductive, and for everyone, for that sort of universal reader, all the time they're saying you have to write like this. It's a pretty, strange in a way,
That is really interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting, because there is that whole tradition, the Stern through Joyce, through Rabelais, through all those. That tradition exists, but none of those people are like foregrounding it as the only tradition. It's like a set of tools that are available to be able to approach reality in a different way. But yeah, they don't force themselves on anyone.
No, and I'm sure from my personal experience, I when I write, I don't try to be difficult. It's the only way I know how to write. I mean, it's the easiest way for me. I would really love to write, a 19th century novel with cliffhangers from one chapter to the. I can do it.
It's so funny.
No, but it's not a choice I made. I can't do the other thing. I would really love to write The Shining by Stephen King. I'm not joking.
Yeah,
I can do it.
See, the problem.
Why? Because it's very difficult to do. Easy to read, difficult to do.
See, if you grew up watching the Dukes of Hazzard, where they, where the racist guys jump the General Lee into the air and freeze frames, how the Duke boy's going to get out of it? You figure out how to end the chapters and then pick up right where. No, you went down the David Lynch wormhole, and everything's got to be weird.
Going back to what you promised to ruin for me today, for me, Ada is not a difficult book to read. I don't find it difficult, but there's something there that says you're not worthy of me. So
it's so good it's so good by the end.
Good.
I kind of hated the first half of it, and the back half is just shockingly good.
I read whole books on Ada. I know everything about it. I mean, that was your plan to spoil it for me.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
sorry. I know everything.
Yeah, there's really nothing to spoil, because it ends with such a like it's not like a plot driven spoiler heavy book, but its concept of time, which you've honed in on in various writings and talked about, like that is really interesting, and like the narrative time within Ada is really fun. I think.
I'm sure.
I'm sure it is. Never gonna read it. Never gonna read it.
No doubt about it. Yeah.
So should we talk about these scenes? So we're going through pages like in the New York Review of Books version is 290 through 252.
I have this one.
Yeah, that's the one that I have over there too. That's the first one I read was that, which I love that cover because it's just very simply what this book is.
Yeah.
Is funny. But we have like a lot of fun bits in that. This to me was like every week it's like, oh, this is the funniest section. And then it's like, no, this is the funniest section.
No, the whole book is like, I mean, this is the infinite jest, really.
Yeah.
That's the real title of this book, you know.
Sure.
I can't get over I should not be surprised anymore. But each week and each section I'm reading, I am just delighted and surprised at how good this sounds and how pitch perfect it is and how tight and economical even as sprawling and big as this is, what do you cut out? What do you take away? Like it's so well done. And it's like this circus trick with no net, and it's just over and over. It just keeps completing. Amazing feats of dexterity writing. Like I'm just in awe of how he pulled this off. And this section in particular with all the tortured artists together in that terrible room. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, so we didn't do a lot of recap last week. Rodrigo, you still there?
I think he lagged because of of William Gaddis' jealousy.
I'm going to remove the Adam. Sometimes that helps.
But no, I mean, to what he was saying as well, like it's such a joy reading this because I don't have to worry about trying to compare myself or trying to, because a lot of times I'll read something like and steal, I want to steal this idea or that technique. And this one is like, I'm never going to do this. There's no way I can do this. So just.
Hello, me again. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
You know, it's like a classical musician appreciating a jazz musician, or a jazz musician appreciating a classical musician, where they're doing something extremely musical that is not where my talents necessarily are, or where I am creatively. I definitely feel about this way with JR. I can just enjoy the riff. And
so this one we didn't do a lot of recap last week, but we can sort of like get into some of these scenes and catch people up, because one of the weird things about the book is that no matter how voice driven and like symphonic and brilliant it is, it still does have like a recapable plot to it in a lot of ways, which some of the books that we've dealt with don't always have that, or don't really, they eschew the plot entirely. And this sort of does. So we start out this section in the 96th Street apartment, which is the place where, if you remember way back when, and things always pay off so much later, and that's why it's kind of interesting to try and recap these. So way back when Gibbs was on the field trip with Bast and was super wasted, he gave Bast a key and was like, if you need to go somewhere to work, you can work here in 96th Street apartment, blah, blah, blah. So they go there, and it's in the apartment building where Schramm, who had knocked his eye out or punctured his eye by throwing a pencil at the ground, and it bounced up and went through his eye, and is super depressive and crazy, and was in Bellevue multiple times. He's left Eigen's apartment. Eigen's like, you're going to be fine. It's cool. They get to 96th Street, and he has hanged himself. So he's dead, hanging there. The police are there. His girlfriend, I think her name's Rhoda is there.
Great character. The voice was so good on Rhoda. So good.
I think there's some scotch over there, and that pack of cigarettes is like clearly not going to be smoked by him anymore. Like, you give that one to me. Like, I really want the cigarettes. And so Gibbs, who's lost a shoe along the way, of course, because that's kind of his bit, catches on fire, loses a shoe, super wasted, shows up. He's there, Eigen's there, and Bast is there in this like crammed apartment that just sounds like literally like just falling down immense amounts of stuff. And I actually have a question for you, because this comes up later. Is some of that stuff that's showing up there, like they have they're like, oh, here's all this toilet paper, all like these boxes of stuff. Is that JR's stuff? Is he using that apartment too as like one of his repositories for his like moving stuff around game, the way that he uses the school to transfer the Army forks or the Navy forks and all that kind of stuff?
I don't know.
I didn't notice it.
What I remember that sort of shocked me when I read the book for the first time, and I read all Gaddis almost in a row. It's like, I think in the section you reviewed or you read last week, there's a very interesting part where Jack Gibbs says, he's trying to write a book on a mechanical piano player or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's the last book by William Gaddis, because Agape, the main character is Jack Gibbs dying, and where's Chad? When looking for a book.
Probably. How crushing. $3, good price.
And I really don't remember. When you said these were the pages we were going to read, I read the pages and then I went from the beginning and tried again, and I'm really scared because I'm hooked again. I wasn't planning to reread this book really at this moment of my life.
It sucks you in. It really sucks you in.
Yep.
But so
have you read that sort of postscript that he wrote, that it's in the essays with Jair as some sort of senator? Haven't you read that one?
I have not.
Oh God, you have to read that.
I need to find that. I need to find that for sure.
No, it's very funny because it was published. I think when A Frolic of His Own came out, he wrote this text. Listen to this because it's amazing. For the New York Times, that he put JR up to date. He's like 28 years old, something like that, And the illustrator for the New York Times, the one who and they published this illustration, it's like a little cowboy because the guy never read the book and thought it was JR from Dallas.
You can't make this up.
The New York Times. And they publish, and they if you go to the page, look for it, there's like a little cowboy there.
That is perfect.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Finally, we get the backstory of why JR got shot. Finally.
Yeah.
I think it's the rush.
Oh, it's so good. I did catch the vibes of the clutter and the crap and the uselessness of it, and kind of. It just gave this feeling of like cacophony, like a physical, like we get the sound of it, but then there's that physical pressure of all those things being there. And I did ask that same question I was reading, is this JR stuff that's stacked up in there? Or, because I don't know, Gibbs didn't really strike me as somebody that would just be packing stuff in. It's just, to me, it was more of like, where's this stuff come from?
And like the name of the apartment's in the name of Greenspan.
Yeah, and he also has that fake name, the pseudonym, for financial reasons or whatever. That fake name that pops up in that section as well. So
the reason that I thought
I don't know what's happening.
The reason I thought it was JR's stuff was well, in a philosophical way, is that once JR gets involved in this, in his whole scheme, he can't stop. And it's just moving things and moving things and moving things. And it's the way that like capitalism just explodes. It doesn't there's no sustainability. There's no temperance. It's just like filling and filling and more and more and more. And it feels like this is just like a new compartment of like, there's a void, and capitalism hates a void. So let's fill it up with like 2-ply toilet paper.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because we see that play out when Bast and JR, well, really it's JR, talk in the bathroom, right? And he's, can you just give me 1 second? And then JR keeps going. Well, no, like I'm not right now. Going, and we can get to that part later because it's such a brilliant, wonderful, like this 6th grader telling you all the schemes about lease bypass.
I don't know what's happening here. I'm moving all over the place in order to try to get better connection.
Yeah, no worries, man. But yeah, I agree, Brian. I think that it is super fun. It is that section that you're talking about that we'll get to where they're talking in the bathroom is really top notch.
But there's a lot of, I'm not smart enough on this first reading to get obviously everything that's going on, but there's like, again, those subtleties of like sitting on a clock, but it's a clock that goes backwards. Right? There's lots of like just cheeky, fun things and thematic elements that he's putting in with all this stuff that they're talking about. But you can still enjoy it just on the surface level, which is where I'm at. I can't really dig too deep into it. But.
And I really like the thing about this book and other books supposedly funny, it's like when you're reading them, like they teach you a new way of being funny, and there are like, it's like really like you have to go through stage 1, stage 2, and by stage 3, you're already part of the action,
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's an interesting part that I marked for Gaddis fans. And you'll probably recognize this, Rodrigo, but on our edition, page 300, he's like talking about Eigen's play and how Schramm has helped him with compositions, helped them with like writer stuff. Like Schramm is like a weird figure that has died of like being like a artistic help, like an artist that like tragically dies, but is like giving them insight into stuff. He's like, yeah, he helped Eigen here too, Bast. Helped him with this play, didn't he, Tom? Told him to drop the first act. It wouldn't change a goddamn thing. Told him it was undigested Play-Doh. Told him he didn't leave the actors or directors an inch to move in because he didn't trust them. Told them that the ending was too neat. He could tell you, Bast. Writer who's run out of agape. Same goddamn thing. Tell him, Tom. Squeeze the universe into a ball. That play is the play from Frolic of His Own.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and it's the same thing where they're like, where in Frolic of His Own, he's suing because there's been this blockbuster movie about the Civil War.
Yeah.
Play that never got produced and never was staged about the Civil War, and is suing. And they're like, they didn't plagiarize you. You plagiarized Plato. Like, you can't do this.
Yeah, that's very interesting because that's one of the things I think that characterize Gaddis, that he's not. I mean, he plays with language, but in a very different way. I mean, he plays with technical languages. All each one of his novels he's like making riffs on legalese or painting thing or here the money language but the thing that the really interesting thing is that he's completely realistic and naturalistic. I mean, he's not doing some sort of extravagant wordplay. He's using, the technical part of each zone.
Yeah.
For his.
It's almost, I'm not sure that I'm going to agree with this later on, but what you're saying, Brian, about like not picking up on all the things, in a way, Gaddis is very anti-metaphor. Like there's not a lot of metaphors in here. There just are those things. Like the things are what they are and it's very direct. It's very like concrete. It's very detritus filled, but it's not like Pynchon where it's asking you to interpret scenes to understand larger ideas or philosophical ideas. It's like, yeah, capitalism is crazy. Here's a 12-year-old who's shifted around all these penny stocks and now owns Eagle Mills.
Yeah.
Like it's like almost like it's almost realistic to a fault.
Yeah, it's true. But in a very
Oh no!
Oh, I feel like we just lost
I feel like we lost
just about to get a nugget.
Anyone watching this, I'll try and edit it for the podcast. But if you hear this, it's because Rodrigo keeps dropping in and out from his Wi-Fi. And I will kick him off and kick him back on in a second here.
It's probably on the American side. They're boycotting any talk that might disparage money.
Yeah, we're getting shut down.
How great though with this book being about money, and today finding out that when Deutsche Bank is just saying your money, we can't give you money anymore. Boy, you're not doing too good, are you?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This section too, like one of my favorite things. I know my line of the week, and hopefully no one will steal it. It ties into this, but like this section also has a lot of sexy stuff in it, or like sexy, dirty jokes, like dirty jokes.
Oh, sure.
On that page, I'm going home to paint one ball blue, another one orange, and when I see my new girl tonight, and then they're like, "Didn't finish your joke." He's like, "If she says what funny looking balls, I'm going to hit her with a hammer." Like there's these weird ass jokes that are dropped within this that are like half dirty and half like misogynistically violent. Which is another, like we mentioned this last week, was where it was like real clear, like the misogynistic like bits that the patter and the way that the people talk has become naturalized within this book and like is really offensive, and that's part of it too. So
what I liked about this section that I think it really clearly illustrates, and it's a theme that I think he's been threading throughout so far, is just how tortured and beat down artists are. Anybody that has an artistic endeavor is just get the shit beat out of them. Mm-hmm. Right, and they're worse for wear. Whereas the scoundrels that move money around and have no moral compass whatsoever are the ones that are succeeding or quote unquote comfortable. They get to be in the big in the suburbs with terrible families, and it's these artists that are in this terrible, cramp-filled, awful, dingy, falling apart, chaotic, can't make sense of it. You know, pencils through the eyes, killing themselves, shoes ripped apart, don't know what's going on. Nobody listens to them. Nobody respects them. One of the kids tries to do a poem and the parents are like, shut the fuck up, we're driving. Like it's, I thought this section was really great when we have those people huddled together after the death of another artist, and the scene that we get, I think it was just really wonderfully illustrates that, that thematic element of the book.
There's two. I thought that this part would really, I see in another way where this book would really resonate with you, Rodrigo, in the sense that there's a lot of conversation about art.
Everything resonates with me these days.
Like the way in which it talks about artists being replicated or reproduced and replaced has like a strong pre-internet vibe to it. So in specific, we're talking about this one section where he's talking about agape, I think. Maybe he's not, but gives us talk, and he's like, thought opera companies could buy dead singers' larynxes, fix them up to sing arias, save fees that way, get the goddamn artists out of the arts all at once. One of these there to destroy everything in their goddamn path, what the arts are all about. And like there is that idea that they would like get these opera singers' larynxes and use those to like reproduce sounds, so you wouldn't have to pay an opera artist. Like all these ways that they're trying to get away with not having the commodity without having the artist is the goal of the capitalist movement within this.
Well, look at Bast with wanting to write music or compose something, and look what everybody wants him to compose. It's
zebras.
It's like something that could be commodified, or we could use this to make money like this way, versus the actual artistic merit of creating something. Right. And what commerce does to art. I think it's a really fascinating, I mean, it's something that we still deal with today, obviously, but
Sorry, guys. I'm on and off all the time. I don't know what's happening with the connection.
I think
Europe is falling. Europe is falling.
We believe it's related to the impeachment hearings going on right now.
Yeah,
and that we are being hosted by who knows what StreamYard's politics are. God only knows. It is super cool that it was super interesting that's the way that they treat artists in here. Not good, but it is interesting that is one of those themes. And what you mentioned about Bast when you dropped out, Rodrigo, is that when he's working on his compositions and what they want him to do, like he's trying to compose to like the grand composition, and meanwhile he's doing that thing for the dancers. Like he spends a whole night, Shrem kills himself, and he spends a whole night composing something for dancers. But like he can't even listen to it because he can't get to the piano because there's too much shit all over it that he can't even play it. He's like, I haven't heard it, and they made me rescore it because she can't sing in C.
That's what I really find really fascinating about Gaddis, about what I was saying at the beginning about him like being some sort of, I'm going to say the name David Lynch. Can I say it? First time.
Okay. Yeah, you can. First time.
He's like some sort of beatnik by David Lynch, you know, and his idea of an artist in this book and in almost all the books has some sort of, you know, that Jack Kerouac resonance of failure and being like beaten by the system and have been like some sort of fashion and being out of fashion and nobody understands me and I'm like some sort of lyrical soul, but he plays it like in a very cold, clinical way, you know, all the time. Well, the famous quote of A Frolic of His Own when he says, you know, justice, you get justice in the next world. Here in this world you have the law, you know.
Yeah.
That's the whole point, you know. I mean, all his characters, and especially Jack Gibbs in this book, they're like under the law all the time, you know, martial law.
Yeah.
Oh, well, and Gibbs is under the law of entropy too. Like Gibbs has secondary laws that, like, there's the laws, the human laws, which are like don't make any sense in the end and are like non-intuitive and disfigure themselves. So like in Frolic of His Own, like there ends up the one point where he's suing himself as both the driver and the victim of the car that ran him over because he tried to jumpstart his car and gets hit by it. And he ends up in this crazy lawsuit where he's suing himself. And the law doesn't really fit. And then there's like the natural law, the physical law, in which Gibbs always repeats like the three laws of thermodynamics, of which leads to entropy. And even references in this section, like your energy is just leaking all over. Like it's this place is just filled with like leaking energy. And there's that part too. So like the all the attempts to like do something outside of those sorts of laws always backfires in one way or another.
Yeah. And I was thinking, as I was rereading this part of the book, and the whole book was coming back to me, this is this stupid idea, but I was thinking who could make a great movie of this and how that movie would be, you know, and I was, the first thing that came to me was like the Coen brothers, you know.
Okay.
Because they have like this sort of, you know, that triumphant failing characters, and they're talking all the time and repeating phrases, and I really like that sort of riffing with language, you know.
I would go with Terry Gilliam, because the movie would never make it. It would fail, and then we could get a documentary of the movie that failed and see how it failed, and I think that would be the perfect encapsulate. I'd rather have that than like Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yeah, I got two. One that's both that are very like straightforward, but two that I could see doing this as like a movie or a long running HBO or Netflix series is oh god, the guy that did The Player, Robert Altman or Richard Linklater.
Oh yeah.
Because
Robert Altman is the guy that in movies invented the idea of everyone talking at the same time, like in real life, you know. So until Altman, everyone was waiting for its turn to speak. You know, it was like, I think that what I was really thinking when I was reading this, I kept on remembering, you know, Seinfeld's apartment with people coming in and out all the time. I mean, that's also the idea of talking about nothing, but it's being everything, you know, all the time.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, there's a part later on that I want to read that's a little bit Seinfeld-esque that reminded me of the Seinfeld thing. But the next scene, so they finally leave there, and we go to the Met, where JR is snuck onto an 8th grade field trip to get to the Met so that he can meet Bast and have his lawyer that he got through like an advertisement that's there to handle his shit is going to meet him in the Egyptian section. And he's like, Bast, you know, you need to do me another favor. And he and Bast have like a long, crazy conversation because Bast has just gotten back from Eagle Mills, where they now own it. They've taken over Eagle Mills through like this paper penny stock transfer of things. And the funniest part of it is where he's constantly like, what do they need a softball diamond for? Like, why don't we move this stuff here? And he's like, well, these are real people. And he's like, no, who cares about them? Like, we're going to do this lease back. If the bank wants them playing softball, the bank can pay for it. Like, it's so clearly like the crassest form of capitalism embodied in a 12-year-old, like just putting it straight out there. Like, the money is to work for me. It is to be moved around constantly. And everything he's like, oh, with your expenses, you get like, and I'm giving you these stocks because you can write them off up to $100. And they're like, write them off of what? There's no salary. There's no earning. It's just like looking for that little edge. This is like, JR is like Moneyball gone awry.
Yeah.
The brilliant part of that section that I just couldn't stop smiling was they're talking about millions of dollars, moving things around, buybacks, move it here, put them together. And then they're like, squabbling over pennies, like of actual money, because they don't actually physically have money. On paper, they're flush. They're doing great. It's, hey, I need like $10. Do you have like? No, I don't have $10. It's like paper money.
That's very interesting about the idea that the Nobel pre-announces, I mean, the age of Elon Musk being the richest man on earth, but he doesn't have anything. I mean, still an attraction, you know?
No, that's still like those numbers scare me. That's like that is like JR writ large, where it's like you go from $24 billion net worth to $208 billion in 9 months.
Yeah,
like,
but there's a very I mean, possibility that next week he'll have less money than we three together, you know? He'll be poor. He can be poor anytime, you know? That's the strange thing, you know?
Yeah, that's
the first 3 lines, I mean, 4 lines are so money in a voice that wrestles. Paper, yes. And we'd never seen it. Paper money? We never saw paper money until it came east. It looked so strange the first time we saw it. Lifeless. What a brilliant. No wonder it took him so long. I mean, you have to write that line after you write the book, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. Oh.
Back thing. So there's a section on hours of 314 in the New York Review of Books. It goes through and explains exactly like what he's trying to do with these with the lease backs and what's going on. This is another one of those moments where like the information is dropped in there very clearly as to what the scheme is and how this is going to work. But then
very nice of him, because this was a very easy section of like, okay, thank you. I get the game. I get the rec. I know what's going on. Like, thank you for letting me catch up.
Yeah.
That bathroom scene was brilliant exposition of what's actually happening.
Yeah, and amortization. Oh God. I love too where he's like, there are real people up there. That's how come. And JR's like, no, but look, hey, I mean, this isn't any popularity contest. Hey. that too is just like every CEO I've ever met.
And there's a beautiful shift in JR's language here too, where he's starting to cuss at them, you know, and like treat them like they're more partners now, more so than looking up to him and getting something from him to get up in the world. They're more on equal footing. And really, actually, JR kind of has better footing because he's actually read all the briefings and the literature that pisses Bast off so much that he's calling these reports literature. I love that. I love that they call that financial stuff literature.
I mean, like, understanding financial spreadsheets and like it's like, man.
And I really like the idea of, you know, getting or reclaiming a very American concept, like, you know, the Horatio Alger sort of success story, and doing with in that way. This book reminds me, I don't know if you read a book by Nathaniel West that is called, I don't remember what, Balls of Smell, The Imaginary Life of Balls of Smell. That it's some sort of deranged, very strange way of success American story, you know. And what he's doing with this book is basically that, you know, the idea of you know, turning head, I mean, taking the classical, one of the main motifs, another of American literature, I mean, of American culture, you know, the idea of the American dream, but presented as a real nightmare in a way, you know. It's people talking all the time and talking, and in a way, it must be like, I mean, he sort of dismantles this idea of success as a Frank Capra movie or Citizen Kane sort of thing, or even Donald Trump sort of thing. No, he says, I mean, get it, in order to get rich, you have to talk a lot and probably being bored, you know.
And be bad. Like JR starts off as like an innocent little kid, and in this section, he's like kind of evil.
Like pensions. Yeah. Who cares about pensions? Who cares about them having? He's like this. It's almost like he's a Charles Dickens character in some ways.
Yeah,
like this ragamuffin type of character. Like, but what
Yeah,
what he's doing is
the Artful Dodger of Oliver Twist.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
all. Yeah.
But what he's doing is fulfilling the promise of America and what it is to be a good American and what you would aspire to be within America is JR. And like it's just ballooned to the most extreme craziness.
No, and the very American idea that you don't have to you don't even have to grow up in order to be rich. You can start being rich as a kid. You know, everything's possible here. You
got to get your paper route and get your friend to do a paper route.
Yeah, and we're like, but that's I mean, that's the great part. I mean, that's where this is like the hyper capitalist moment where that what you're saying is really interesting, Rodrigo. Where it is the Horatio Alger or the Horatio Alger, whatever, the myth of the American who works their way up, who like puts in the hours, grinds away, has the paper out, you know, slowly but surely makes it to like the upper middle class that succeeds. And we all know that that's bullshit. And like, this is like, yeah, that's bullshit. Like he all the time, he's like, what am I going to do? Like import, export like coffee cups? No, I'm going to like just make this huge paper empire and like be big and be gigantic. And that's how I could become successful. You don't become successful working for it. You become successful finding a loophole and bringing a class action lawsuit against someone who's screwed up.
Well, there's this other classical American novel that it's What Makes Sammy Run. You know, it has some sort of that impulse. You know, the idea of someone like taking shortcuts all the time, you know, and climbing, you know, step by step over people's heads. You know, that takes place in Hollywood, which is probably, you know, the place where this may happen in a more clear way.
That's true. That's very true. Just see what other sections before we go on. Oh, the Decephalus home. Oh yeah, that's right. Dan gets out of the hospital, goes home to his wife. They have a really interesting, great marriage.
Yeah.
And so I'm right that she's trying to like have sex with him in front of their kids to teach them about sex, correct? I wasn't misreading that. That part's really interesting, especially because that also sets up a part where he's like, oh, measuring the studs. Because remember, the mortgage got rejected because the improvements to his home wasn't built to be sustained. They were 24 inches apart instead of 16, and therefore they can't give him a mortgage. And that like I think that becomes more of a plot point, sort of gets here, but I think it becomes more later as well.
Yeah. Well, and the other really interesting paradoxical thing about JR is that it's a success story, and I mean it won the National Book Award, man.
I know.
What planet was that? You know?
What an amazing time!
God. Well, he won it with a frolic of his own again. Yeah.
Which is wild. It really is wild to have won it twice with these two sorts of books.
And I think that in between, William Gass won it with The Tunnel. I want to go back to that, but Back to the Future. Marty, let's go there. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of match though, like when you look at cinema from the 70s, like, boy, like how do they make those films that came out in the 70s versus the stuff that came out in the 80s and 90s that was winning awards?
Yeah.
That bloody, violent, take no prisoners America that they wanted to like really put a focus on, versus that, you know, kind of.
But with William Gaddis, what I really find very fun in a way, in a perverse way, is the idea that he always in all his interviews declared himself an outsider. I don't give a damn about the literary system, whatever. And they gave him the prizes and said, you have to come to pick it up, man. You know?
Yeah, I mean, and not that many years before was when Pynchon wins for Gravity's Rainbow and doesn't appear.
Yeah.
And does the whole whatever the professor's name is and the streaker. But yeah, this section too, like to end this like sort of recappy part of it, there is a lot of like fun bits towards the end of like plot related. So you go back to the school. Well, I know that Dan DeCephalis's kids have sold all of his suits to the thrift store, but he's been in the hospital for so long, they've already been picked up by other people because they were trying to show initiative. That's very funny. And then they're at the school and people are wearing his suits. One of whom finds a condom in the back pocket and is like, "Oh, I would never use this though. This guy's been sitting on this for years. It's probably not good anymore." And then there's the major, whatever the major's last name is, I actually can't think of, where he's like talking about his accident and getting his car stolen and all that, and how he had left his car to get stored in New York. They copied his keys. They steal his car. They also then steal everything from his house. So he's taking things from the school to try and replace them. He's like, "I'm just going to take one of those washers, dryers at TV all at cost, like off your hands. You know, I got to fill up my house again," because they literally just came and stole everything. And then you have the great part where Vern is on the phone. Vern, the superintendent, whose entire yard has been paved with blacktop.
Yeah.
Which is the part that I thought was the most Seinfeld-esque, where like they're like, "We're gonna sue Petrocelli for damages," and the senator's there, and he's like, "So to say there's no gift, he sues Petrocelli for damages? Petrocelli comes to do a nice job, maybe too much enthusiasm, all his work to do a nice job, all the trees out, all the blacktop. How does he have to settle? Free. No bills, nothing. You take out one tree, one elm tree, one oak tree, 70 feet, 80 feet high. How much does it cost to take out one tree? 2-inch pressed blacktop, the best, indestructible. No grass to mow. 9,000 square feet, no more grass to mow. Don't leave it to work all the time. He parks the car anywhere. No trees to smash into fenders. No birds shitting on him." Like, I love that because it is that sort of like weird, that patter, that Seinfeldian patter and observation.
Yeah.
Also, like
that's the really fun thing about this book is that nothing you've just read is funny per se, but you're cracking up all the time. I remember when I was rereading and at the top of page 332, when they say to him, 3 typewriters and 1 adding machine disappear over the weekend. Do you know anything about it? And I was laughing my heart. I couldn't stop laughing. And it's not funny. I mean, it's not a joke, you know?
It's so funny. I love that line. I couldn't stop laughing. I said it to Brian just out of nowhere, like no context. 9,000 square feet, no more grass to mow.
Yeah, I got that early. It's either early in the morning or late at night. I'm like, what the hell is Gaddis line? That's probably, I haven't got there yet, but that's Gaddis.
And the part is after that is amazing because it says, "This is the last time. Do you understand? This is the last time I want to see you sent to my office for something like this. Do you understand?" And he says, "Me too, but yes, sir. But I just wonder. See this list of all these numbers I was adding up here in the adding machine. I wonder if I could just get it back." It's amazing.
They're like, "Please don't use the typewriter adding machine. You know how much these things cost?" One thing we left out that is really fortuitous and crazy is that so Gibbs is pissed because he never starts with the whatever, the Pledge of Allegiance or any of the stuff that you're supposed to start your class with, and they attacked him for that. So today, in this end the day, he goes into the office, takes over the PA system during homeroom, and reads the entire Constitution. And they're constantly trying to figure out how long the Constitution is. So like calling the library and being like, "How long is it? We need to know like when our classes are going to resume." And they call back and they're like, "It's 204 feet, sir."
Yeah.
And then out of nowhere, in the New York Review of Books on 147, very top, this is Gibbs reading from the Constitution. "From office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes," and I was like, "Oh my God!" Like what what synchronicity that just happens right as that's happening right now.
No, and I'm this at the same time, after all the funny stuff, I really like. Well, it's my favorite part in the pages I read in 332 near the end, when he stops and says, "And out under the beginning reproof in the fixed gaze from the wall, they move at home to crowd and noise." I mean, that he stops all the talking and puts on like some sort of descriptive paragraphs, like saying, "Listen, man, I can also do this." It's like reminding the reader, we're having fun, but I can have fun this way also, you know?
Yeah, that's the part that makes you kind of throw your hands up like, this guy's incredible. Because the voice and the dialogue is insane. And then when he wants to do a little bit of exposition or a paragraph of description, and it was just...
God, no, it's amazing.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it also, I mean, that kind of ties into like that metaphor, anti-metaphor thing, in which those sections, like last week when we talked about them, a lot of them are like specifically what's being seen or what's being passed by. They're like individual like items almost, and it's kind of like they almost become lists, and they're beautiful, and they're like also very concrete, and they're not
but they sound in a way like directions in a script, but in a very lyrical way, you know.
Right. They're not like, because I can imagine someone doing this and then writing those parts and being like super abstract and like nonsense. And this isn't. It is still grounded. It's just a different form of what that grounding is.
True. Yeah.
So do you guys have a favorite line? I've got a long one. So I'll go first because I honed in on the sex part.
I'm going to open the book and do this, you know, and where the finger falls, you know.
Right.
Points.
Here's mine from 350 in the New York Review of Books one. Micro fraud. Yes, that's fraud's electrical unit. His resistance at a minimum and his field fully excited. Laid milliamp on the ground potential, raised her frequency and lowered her capacitance, pulled out his high voltage probe and inserted it into her socket, connecting them in parallel, and short-circuited her shunt. Bar magnet had lost all of its field strength. Milliamp tried self-induction and damaged her solenoid. Fully discharged, was unable to excite his generator, so they reversed polarity and blew each other's fuses.
Right.
That's some nerdy ass sex talk.
I want to give our guest Rodrigo the final say, so I'll do mine next. In the New York Review of Books, 291. You live here with him, Rhoda? Officer, for the love of Christ, what are you trying to... Of course she lives here. Look at the... You think a man puts his dishes in the dish rack backwards like that? Collects all the dirty ashtrays and leaves them in the sink? Leaves the cap off the toothpaste, the cap off of everything, and the coat hanger? Look at the goddamn coat hanger. You ever know a man who'd do that to a coat hanger? Go look at the toilet. You'll see papers on the roller backwards too. One will get you 5. The papers, Mr. Both of you better wait next door. Rhoda, you want to tell us? I just want to get my things, man. Just the sound. Sounds, this has to be read aloud. It's so good.
I wish we could get a hold of the guy who did the audiobook. I'm going to try.
Yeah.
There's an article about him not that long ago about what he had to do.
No, I'm going to choose this line. I really liked it because I think it sort of encompasses everything. It says, where is it? We're always having trouble on these lines. I know. Listen, what? I like that.
I love it. So, oh man. Okay, so next week we are going through in the New York Review of Books. It's through page 424. In the other editions, the Penguin one, the Knopf one, the Delkey one are all through page 400. So Rodrigo, is there anything that you want to plug? Any books or movies or shows or anything that you're excited about?
That I saw recently?
Yeah.
I saw the Fran Lebowitz thing with Martin Scorsese on Netflix. It's funny. It's good.
Is it?
Yeah. But it was busy because I've just finished a new book, so I wasn't like watching a lot of things.
Oh, you finished your own book?
Yep.
Whoa. Is it a monster or a small book?
Yeah. Short one. It's a short one. A shorty.
I'm curious, your writing habits, do you have like a word count that you do a day, or are you writing every day and have a set, or is it just kind of more of sit down and what's a good...
Well, I have to, I write every day because I have to write every day for work. Not the nonfiction, sad, sordid part of, telling to the world about coronavirus in Spain, But the other thing, I write like in I don't know, streaks. I mean, it's like I don't have a page, count, nothing like that.
Because like when I read your finished work, to me it feels like when you get it sounds or feels like to me when you get going or you have an idea or a scene, like it just gushes from you, and there's
sort of,
energy. It's like a torrent of
But I mean, maybe there have been times that in a day I wrote 40 pages, and there are days that I wrote 2 paragraphs. I mean, it's not like something you can.
Good. I just want to hear that you're mortal. That makes me feel a little better. You have hard days. Well.
Mortal. I'm mortal.
Oh man. Anything you want to plug, Brian?
Nothing really. Yeah. No.
No, nothing good. There's no good media. Bad time.
Nothing to tell us about the vaccines.
Yeah.
Something like that. Mm-hmm.
Really, please let this end soon. Please let these vaccines save everything. I don't think I can take this much more.
See, this is what happens when the Bills are good and the Patriots are bad. This shit.
You know what really scares me? My theory. It's like that we grew accustomed in a very bad way to the idea of, mainly from movies, Roland Emmerich and all these movies, that very fast, spectacular Armageddons,
Yeah.
and I have starting to have this little suspicion about that we're living like a slow motion apocalypse, and it's going to be like this. It's going to end exactly the same, but like in 3 years and a half.
Yeah. There's no Skynet that pushes a button and then it nukes everything, and then
in a way, it's going to be like a William Gaddis end of the world idea.
It just entropies out. Everything just like loses all of its power. Nothing
Very
happened.
slow.
Just a slow march with a shoe that has no shoelace and the sole ripping off and
rubber band.
Getting drunk. Where's my thing? Who's that? Oh God, yeah.
Where's the Scott? Oh my God.
I mean, and you're going to get vaccinated, and maybe you're going to grow a third arm, and it's going to be okay.
I hope so. I'd be down for that. I have uses.
You can use it for baseball. I mean, with 3 arms, you can be like the best baseball player ever.
Exactly, man. You can hold 2 baseballs, and it'd be great.
I'll hang around long enough for hopefully Will to translate or learn Spanish so I can read your next book. So.
I think he's almost done.
I think so.
I think so too. So, anyways, thank you, Rodrigo. It's super fun. It's always good to see you.
It's always.
And stay safe as things go to craziness in Spain.
Yep.
Although you have nothing, you guys have nothing. It's like, oh yeah, it's like we're shutting down. It's like, oh yeah, we might not have a country next week.
I really like, when I was, like watching the Capitol scenes last week, I have to admit that it was like, I'm watching, America the Beautiful becoming Latin America the Ugly, finally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I saw so many times in my country, that's all. Well, no, we saw it 2 weeks ago during Maradona's wake, that they got into the government house and started like playing with the coffin with the, so.
See, this is what happens when Hugo Chavez messes with our elections. See, there it is.
No, but think about this. You're just beginning to learn about this beautiful world outside the United States. Are you familiar with the idea of karma?
Karmas. I know karmas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, thank you again. Thank you both. Super fun.
I use. Sorry. No, I always think about United States. For me, it's I call it the Oscar for Best Foreign Movie syndrome. Once a year, Americans go to see a movie about a shepherd girl being raped by his uncle in Iraq, and they cry and they say, "It's very far away." What's going to happen? Well,
oh my God! Thank you guys. We'll be back next week with their talk.
Now you're having, men dressed as some sort of freaked out Village People members, buffalo head guys,
Yep.
Oh,
probably a Bill's Mafia. Okay, see you guys.